Hello everyone and welcome to Edusurg Clinics. I am Dr. Gunjan Desai and today we are going to discuss a very recent update or a guideline that has come up in acute pancreatitis. This is a multi-center effort from American group as well as the Spanish and the Portuguese gastroenterology group, and they have highlighted a lot of points when it comes to management of acute pancreatitis. We already have a lot of videos on this, the revised Atlanta classification, definition, causes, as well as management in the first 7 days as well as later. You can have a look at all of these videos in the playlist on pancreas. In this video, we are going to summarize the guideline. For those who are interested in the topic, I would recommend reading the entire article. Some key changes that have happened in this guideline are there was a lot of debate around the hydration point. The resuscitation point in this guideline is moderate targeted resuscitation, which is 1.5 ml per kilogram per hour. When it comes to nil per oral advice that is routinely given in acute pancreatitis, but something that we have already been saying is not required, the advice in this guideline is immediate or early enteral feeding less than 24 to 48 hours of admission. Routine antibiotic prophylaxis is not required for necrosis. It is reserved for specific indications, and we will see that in this presentation. Early surgical debridement, of course, is no longer recommended. We have already had a video on the Pental trial, which is the founder of the step up approach, and we will see again here that step up approach is what is preferred. So the paradigm shift in management of acute pancreatitis is that less is often more, and the focus has shifted from aggressive intervention to a physiological supportive care in an organ sparing manner. The definition remains the same, the diagnostic triad of clinical, biochemical, and imaging parameter. Remember that the imaging here is a transabdominal ultrasound, which is first line within 24 to 48 hours, primarily to detect gallstones or bile duct stones, and a CT is usually preferred after 3 to 5 days of onset of symptoms. Clinically is the typical pain, and biochemical is amylase or lipase more than 3 times the upper limit of normal. Now, etiology, we all know, we look at the history. We have a separate video on this, but at admission, you can look at the alcohol binge, calcium levels, triglyceride, especially more than 1000 are definitive, and you can treat these immediately with fasting or insulin. Transabdominal ultrasounds will look at CBD stones. If these are not there, then you can repeat a transabdominal ultrasound after the patient has stabilized, and MRCP and EUS is advanced imaging, which comes again after the patient has stabilized. Genetic testing is something that we don't do routinely in acute cases, and that is what is the advice from this guideline. The genetic testing or immunological testing for IgG4 related pancreatitis are advised only for recurrent and idiopathic cases. So this is how you can manage these patients stepwise, especially in cases of recurrent acute pancreatitis. Remember that ERCP is therapeutic and not diagnostic. Coming to classification, and we have a separate video on this, so I'm not going to go into details, but there are two classifications for severity. You have the revised Atlanta classification where you look at transient or persistent organ failure. The difference is organ failure going more than 2 days. Okay, so that is something that is there in revised Atlanta classification. And you have a determinant based classification where you can have no organ failure, no necrosis, then sterile necrosis or transient organ failure, then persistent organ failure or infected necrosis, and then both. And both is the group which will have the highest mortality. It is important that you classify your patients prior to initiating advanced treatments. Now coming to few important interventions, the most critical points are fluids, nutrition and pain management. Fluid, the older concept was bolus, but currently the concept is bolus 10 ml per kg only to be given for 2 hours if there are signs of hypovolemia. So new standard is moderate resuscitation and aggressive hydration is not recommended beyond 2 hours unless there are clinical signs of hypovolemia. Monitor for fluid overload constantly, and if signs appear, reduce or discontinue fluids immediately. Like I already mentioned, third prescription for fluid is RL. After the bolus, the maintenance rate is 1.5 ml per kg per hour. Coming to pain management, as we all know, it is the WHO step ladder pattern. Mild pain, you only use paracetamol. We don't use NSAIDs also. Moderate to severe pain, you can go to weak or strong opioids. And refractory pain, you may also need epidural analgesia. Coming to nutrition, you can give oral in mild cases. In severe cases, a nasogastric or a nasojejunal tube may be required, but consider the gut as your friend when you are treating these patients. And unless there is abdominal compartment syndrome or ileus that is not getting resolved, the patients don't need to be nil by mouth. So for antibiotic prophylaxis, which is the most common confusing point, remember these indications. You start antibiotics if there is concurrent acute cholangitis, pneumonia, UTI, or suspected or confirmed infected pancreatic necrosis. If none of this is present, there is a strong recommendation against routine prophylactic use, and this is very important. You can use procalcitonin to objectively guide initiation as well as de-escalation of antibiotic therapy. The preferred regimens are carbapenems, high dose third generation cephalosporins, or quinolones plus metronidazole. So these are the options. Remember this, that there is a strong recommendation against routine prophylactic antibiotic use. So that is something that you need to remember. Now coming to biliary pancreatitis, if you know that the patient has acute cholangitis along with biliary pancreatitis, this is the only indication where an urgent ERCP is indicated, which is less than or equal to 24 hours. If there are CBD stones, but the patient is not in cholangitis, you can do an ERCP in the same admission, but it is not going to be urgent. And after the ERCP, if it is mild biliary pancreatitis, laparoscopic cholecystectomy can be performed during the same admission, and this drastically reduces the risk of recurrent attacks. So remember that if the patient has persistent cholestasis, CBD stone, but no cholangitis and is clinically stable, defer your MRCP or EUS for at least 3 days and up to 1 week as per this guideline to allow for spontaneous stone passage. So this is very important. Many times we see that pancreatitis is there, no cholangitis is there, but still the ERCP is done, and many times the pancreatitis worsens. So let the patient settle and then do the ERCP if there is no cholangitis. So very clinical decision to be taken. Now, important points that are to be seen in these patients, the most important thing is abdominal compartment syndrome, ICU admission if there is persistent organ failure, non-responsive organ failure, or infected pancreatic necrosis with systemic compromise. Monitor intra-abdominal pressure in all ICU patients, and if you see abdominal compartment syndrome, or even if it is not there, start preemptively managing the patient so that they don't come into this stage. Sedation may be required, nasogastric tube required, diuretics, drainage of ascites, and decompressive laparotomy is the last resort. Patients can be managed with all these tubes, and a decompressive laparotomy can be avoided. Local complications, and we have already discussed this in detail in the video on Penter trial. So the step-up approach, in brief, you start with medical management, then you go to endoscopic or percutaneous drainage, then you go to endoscopic necrosectomy, and then you go to surgery if all these measures are not helping in managing the local complications. So that is a step-up approach, and this has replaced the initial approach of doing a laparotomy and a necrosectomy without any percutaneous or endoscopic step-up interventions. So have a look at that video. It is something that you may find very useful. Now, coming to splanchnic vein thrombosis, and one of the most common thrombosis that you see in these patients is the splenic vein thrombosis. So, LMWH is recommended in these patients. If there is a portal vein thrombus or a progressive splenic vein thrombosis, then you will need therapeutic anticoagulation. So, that is something that you need to remember. Also, remember that these patients may have deranged INR and they may have increased risk of bleeding also. So you have to balance the two, thrombosis versus bleeding, and adjust the doses of your LMWH accordingly. Disconnected pancreatic duct syndrome, something that you see late in patients of acute pancreatitis. Suspect if there is prolonged fluid drainage after intervention. Secretin enhanced MRCP can be done. High amylase in drain fluid is a marker for disconnected pancreatic duct syndrome. We have a published article on how to manage disconnected pancreatic duct syndrome. You can see it on PubMed. Treatment basically is luminal stent or endoscopic transmural drainage, resection, or a persistent pancreatic fistula forming, which will later be converted into a fistulojejunostomy. So, a lot of options to treat it, a different topic in itself. Aftermath of acute pancreatitis are the long-term effects, and we all know that the long-term effects can be exocrine or endocrine insufficiency. High-risk patients are those with severe necrotizing pancreatitis, alcohol as an etiology, post-necrosectomy patients, and patients with recurrent acute pancreatitis. Endocrine insufficiency, we all know, you look at fasting glucose and HbA1c, and if there is diabetes, they will need diabetes management. For exocrine insufficiency, the commonest thing is ask the patient about steatoria. If it is there, start the patient on pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy. Continuous outpatient monitoring is important. So even if your patient does not have these insufficiencies, monitor the patient at least annually and monitor for these parameters, history taking, and analyze if your patient needs increase in dose of pancreatic enzymes or diabetes management. So basically, when it comes to acute pancreatitis management, based on this article, the 2026 guidelines, something that I would recommend all of you to read. The first point is defining it, then resuscitation, nutrition, analgesia, antibiotics, severity assessment, after that ICU admission, if there is organ failure or severe necrotizing pancreatitis. In ERCP, only in cases of acute cholangitis, it is urgent. For all other cases, it is elective. Infected necrosis, you follow the step up approach. Monitor the patient for thrombosis as well as abdominal compartment syndrome. For mild biliary acute pancreatitis, index admission, laparoscopic cholecystectomy is preferred. For severe acute pancreatitis or patients with necrosis who have undergone necrosectomy, screen them for exocrine and endocrine function at 3, 6, 12 months and then annually. So the important point is treat the patient as a whole, follow a stepwise approach, have a flowchart or a checklist in your mind on how you are going to manage all these parameters. Explain to the patient that this is a long journey, may take 6 weeks to 2 months for the patient to resolve if it's severe acute pancreatitis. So diagnose accurately, resuscitate moderately, feed early, and intervene on specific indications and on basis of specific guidelines and approaches like step-up approaches that have been devised to help you in managing these patients. Thank you.